Hello guys, welcome back to Annie Narrates. Here we review stories that beautiful people like yourselves post on the internet. The title for today's story goes like this. Mom and fiance never show up at our wedding. 1 week passes by and mom is back and tells me all about my estranged twin sis. So I smirk and throw these papers in her face and tell that everyone in the family knows about her lies now. So I, 27 female, was supposed to get married to my fiance Alex, 28 male, about a week and a half ago. But obviously it didn't take place, because otherwise I wouldn't be here. Alex and I have been together for almost 3 years, and he proposed to me about 8 months ago. I loved him, so I said yes, naturally, and we started planning for the wedding. At the 6th month, I started sensing that there was something off about his behavior, but I didn't think much of it, because I thought it must be just nerves. I believed that his behavior had changed because of pre-wedding jitters, and when I asked him about it, he said the same, so I was satisfied. But in the weeks leading up to the wedding, his behavior just got consistently weirder. He would stay missing for hours, even after he was done with work. And when I'd asked him what he was up to, he'd tell me that he was just hanging out with his buddies. They would cover for him as well if I would ever call out of suspicion, so I was never able to find out what was really going on until it was too late. Eventually the date of the wedding came around, and Alex and I decided to spend the night before the wedding in separate houses because apparently it was bad luck or something to see each other before the big day. He wasn't a big believer of such superstitions, and neither was I, so I found it a little strange when he suggested this. But he insisted upon it, so I agreed. He stayed at the hotel, and I stayed in my own apartment the night before, so we wouldn't run into each other. On the day of the wedding, I showed up at the venue right on time, but he never did, and neither did my mother. I kept waiting for hours, but around 1 in the afternoon, I decided that the guests needed to eat. I opened the bar, and lunch was served. I was sobbing like crazy, and my dad consoled me, and so did all my bridesmaids and the groomsmen. But there was just no stopping me from crying until my eyes were red and swollen. Everybody had tried to contact Alex and my mother throughout the morning, but both their phones were turned off. Not even the best man knew where he was. For one crazy second, I even considered that maybe Alex and my mother had eloped. But then I thought that it was way too unlikely for Alex to run away with someone so significantly older than him. He'd always said that he wouldn't want to be with an older woman. I could tell that something very fishy was going on, but I didn't have any answers because every theory that I could come up with just sounded weird and impossible, even to me. I spent my wedding day crying in the hotel room all by myself, while trying to reach Alex somehow. On the next day, however, something crazy happened. My maternal grandmother decided to pay me a visit to my room before she left. Everybody had strict instructions to leave me alone because I didn't want to speak to anyone at the moment, and my bridesmaids were supposed to make sure of that. But they told me that my grandmother had insisted on meeting me before she left because apparently she had something very important that she wanted to share with me and couldn't leave without letting me know. I still wasn't convinced, but when she said that it had something to do with my mother, I realized that I had to let her in, so I could get to the bottom of this. So I let my grandmother in so we could talk. She started off by telling me that she was really sorry about what was happening to me and wished that she could do something to set things straight again. Something told me that she knew exactly what had happened, but was hesitating to tell me, probably because she wanted to protect my mother. And in that moment, my worst fears were confirmed, that my mother definitely had something to do with Alex not turning up for the wedding. And these were not two separate incidents like I had been forcing myself to believe. My grandmother told me that she probably knew where her daughter was, and she also knew where Alex was. She went on to tell me that I was not the only daughter that my mother had, and that there had been a huge secret that she had been keeping from me for a really long time, but now she regretted everything and felt like I deserved to know the truth. It was a lot of information to process within a couple of seconds, But she went on speaking and told me a couple of more things, each worse than the one before. So, apparently, I had a younger sister who I didn't know about until recently. Nobody apart from my mother and my grandmother knew the truth, not even my own father. And no, my mother hadn't cheated. I had a full biological sister with the same set of parents as me. The reason I'd never heard about her or even met her was because my mother had given her away as soon as she was born to a friend of hers. My parents were relatively young when they had me. Both of them were fresh out of college, and my dad didn't even have a job when my mother got pregnant with me. They decided to give birth to me, but didn't think things through because after I was born, they were pretty much living hand to mouth and barely had any money. I was about 2 years old when my mother got pregnant again, and by then, things were at an all-time low for my parents because they were so broke that my parents didn't even have any money for rent. My mother knew that she couldn't afford to have another child, but she wanted to, since she loved being a mother apparently. She knew that if she told my father about the pregnancy, it would just lead to a fight, and that's the last thing that she needed. So, she decided that she was going to go live with her mother for a while until the baby was born, and then bring home the child once my father was in a better place financially. But it didn't work out the way she wanted to, because even though my father was okay with her moving to her mom's house for a few weeks with me, he wasn't okay with her living there for almost 10 months, and he began to suspect that she was pregnant again. She insisted that she wasn't, and she just wanted to be with her parents for a while. It would even help me to have a stable home environment for some time, and that's why she wanted to go for such a long period of time. My mother also told my dad that if we were out of his hair for a while, he would find it easier to find a job and settle down. And then we'd be back and live together like always. My dad said that he would think about it, but as luck would have it, within a couple of days he got a massive job offer. But to take it up, he would have to move to India for a while. It was a great offer, and he would be a fool not to take it up, especially given our circumstances. So, my mother convinced him to leave and said that she would be just fine with her parents. My dad left for India and didn't come back for almost a year. I was there with my mother at my grandparents' house for the entire duration of her second pregnancy, but I don't remember any of it because I was too young. Once my father came back, my mother tried to tell him about this second daughter, but couldn't because her nerves failed her. The longer she hid it, the harder it became for her to come out with the truth. And then, months turned into years, but my mother still did not tell him about the truth, and by then, the friend who had been taking care of my sister had also become pretty attached to the baby. So, she did the only thing that she could do at that point. She gave her younger daughter away to her friend and asked her to raise her as her own. Her friend agreed and was kind enough to keep the legalities out of it. It was a completely informal and verbal agreement which could have easily backfired on my mother, but thankfully her friend was a good person and let her visit her daughter occasionally so they could still have a relationship. By the time all of this happened, my mother and I were back to living with my dad since my dad was back for good. So whenever we would visit my grandmother, my mother would sometimes sneak out and visit her daughter at her friend's place. We visited my grandmother at least once a month, so she got to see her daughter pretty often. And because she had grown up in that neighborhood, we never questioned it, because we believed that she was probably just catching up with old friends of hers whenever she wasn't at home. None of us ever suspected a thing. My parents kept their bank statements separate and private, so my dad was also never able to find out that she was also funding her other daughter's education and whatnot behind his back. He trusted her implicitly, and that's how she repaid him. Fast forward to more recent times, my grandmother told me that my sister had wanted to meet me and her family for a while now, because a friend of my mother's who had been raising her for so long had passed away from a heart attack a couple of months ago. So she had been living on her own for all those months and was feeling really lonely. This is why my mother had decided that she was going to finally introduce her to the family and ease us into having a good relationship. But she didn't know how to break this to me, so she first decided to go to my fiance for help. She asked Alex to accompany her on her visit to my sister, so she could introduce them first. And then she was hoping that maybe Alex would help her out by introducing her to me eventually. Unfortunately, things did not go according to plan because Alex ended up falling for my sister instead. My grandmother told me that Alex and my sister met for the first time in her house, and she could tell instantly that he was really nervous around her. My grandmother picked up on that energy and warned my mother against going along with her plan because she knew that there was no way this could end well. But my mother didn't pay any heed to her warning and was pretty confident that Alex wasn't interested in anyone but me, so there was no harm in her introducing him to my sister. But with time, Alex and my sister began to text more, and a couple of months ago, she even moved here to be closer to Alex. She told our mother that she just wanted to feel closer to her family, but the real reason was obviously Alex. Even then, my mother, Alex, and my sister would meet up for brainstorming sessions on how to talk to me about this. Months passed, and they were still not able to come up with a solid plan on how they would spring this on me, and the meetings just became a pretext for Alex to spend time with my sister. Eventually, my mother got too busy with helping me plan for the wedding to even attend these meetings, and it was just Alex and my sister hanging out together. Which is why Alex would go missing for hours after work. His friends knew about it, but they figured that this was just him letting off steam before the wedding and didn't take it seriously. They even covered for him and then had the audacity to appear shocked when he didn't show up at the wedding, even though they knew what was going on all along. All of them had been stringing me along like a fool for the last few months, and I've been overlooking every single thing that should have set me off. Finally, about a week before the wedding was scheduled to take place, Alex approached my mother and told her that he was in love with my sister and wanted to elope with her. Not only was she okay with it, but she encouraged it because she thought that it would be her younger daughter's one chance at happiness and believed that it was fate that brought them together. And my mother is the one who organized the plan for them to run away together, one night before the wedding. She's the one who helped Alex and my sister plan so they would be out of the state by the morning of my wedding. And she tagged along with them so she wouldn't have to face me or my father because she knew what she'd done. My grandmother knew about all of this but didn't want to tell me on the day of the wedding because she didn't think it was the right time. She waited until the next day so she could break it to me gently without making a public spectacle of the whole thing. I didn't know whether I should thank her or not after she was done telling me the story of what happened because I was in shock and did not even begin to understand what I was supposed to say to it. So I just sat there quietly and said nothing. She told me that she felt that she had to tell me because things had gone too far and too out of hand for her to be okay with any of this anymore. She said that she wished I could forgive her and then left without another word. After she left, I just sat there in my room trying to process everything until my father and my bridesmaids knocked on my door asking if they could come in because they wanted to know what my grandmother had said to me that was so urgent. I let them in, and with great difficulty, I shared the story with them as well. My father almost fainted by the time I was done telling him everything, and that's exactly how I felt about the situation. After spending one day in the hotel, all of us headed back home. Once I was in my apartment, I completely broke down and did nothing for the next couple of days. It was only my grandmother's visit around the fourth day that made me snap out of it because she'd brought photographs and letters that my mother had written for her younger daughter when she was living away from her. She wanted me to have them as evidence in case I needed it now. I hadn't even been talking to my father when I was grieving, but after my grandmother's visit, I decided to ring him and talk to him. If there was anyone who could feel exactly what I was going through at the time, then it would be my dad. When I called him, he answered immediately, and he sounded like he was just as depressed as I was. So, it'd probably been a good idea to call him because that made us both feel better. I told him about the pictures and letters that my grandmother had given me to use as proof against my mother. He told me that he had already filed for divorce, so those pictures would probably come in handy to use against my mother, so she doesn't take advantage of my father for the settlement or worse. alimony. We discussed things over the phone, and the next day, he came over and handed me a copy of the divorce papers, just in case my mother visited me first. And I handed him copies of the pictures and letters from my grandmother for his use. He told me that he still hasn't heard anything from my mother yet, and was positive that she was out having fun with her secret daughter and her new son-in-law, who she stole from me to give to her daughter. Like it was something she could give away like that. We shared how we felt about the situation with each other, and I've gotta say, I felt loads better after speaking to him and had a fresh perspective on what to do. Because now, I was no longer thinking of myself as the victim, but in fact, I was thinking of ways I could get back at them and hurt them even worse than they'd hurt me. So, I did what I think I should have done a really long time back, pretty much the day I found out about my mother's secret. I decided to post the whole story on my social media accounts, and I posted it pretty much everywhere, along with the proof so that I would cover all bases and every single person in my life would get to know the truth. A lot of my relatives, especially on my mother's side, reached out to me and let me know that they were with me on this and would never speak to my mother again. Because what she'd done was super messed up, and of course, it goes without saying that all my friends are with me too. I felt pretty vindicated when I realized that most people were on my side and my mother would be in store for a nasty surprise when she came back. She came back almost a week after my supposed wedding day. She showed up at my door, but Alex was not with her. It was just her alone. I did open the door, but I didn't let her in and told her that whatever she wanted to say, she could say it from outside my house. And then she started making up some cock and bull story about how I had some estranged twin sister and Alex ran into my sister when he was away for work. And apparently, he fell for her hard. They ran away and my mother claimed that she did everything in her power to stop them, but it just didn't work. I asked her why she'd never mentioned this sister of mine to me, and why exactly didn't she attend my wedding. She fumbled a little at that, but she told me that she had to give my twin sister away for adoption when she was a baby because my father insisted upon it, and she didn't attend my wedding because she was trying to stop Alex and my sister from running away together. She couldn't do it, but she couldn't come back either because there'd be a lot of questions about why she hadn't been present at the wedding, so she chose to disappear for a week. It was a pathetic story that she cooked up. Essentially, my mother was trying to throw the two of them under the bus to save her own skin. Because obviously Alex and my sister wouldn't be coming back here, but she still had a family to salvage. I heard all her lies very patiently while she played the victim, and then, when she was finally done, I went inside, grabbed the divorce papers and the letters that she'd written to my sister in the past, and threw them in their face with the meanest smirk I could manage. I told her that she could save her lies for someone who'd buy them, because now, everyone in the family knows the truth. And then, I shut the door without even waiting for her to go through the papers. It took a while for her to realize what was happening, but as soon as she did, she started banging on the door and crying like crazy. She screamed that she didn't have a choice and she was just trying to help her daughter find happiness. I yelled back asking if she didn't even think about my happiness because after all, it was my fiance who had run away with her younger daughter, all because of her. And then she brought up a pretty valid point. She told me that Alex was the one who messed up. So, if anything, he should be the one people are mad at, but instead, she is the one getting a divorce now apparently, and having her life ruined. We fought for a while, but she left eventually, still crying. She said it, and it got me thinking because I guess Alex should actually be the one getting punished. What she did was worse than my mother's actions. So, am I the a-hole for punishing my mother for something that technically my fiance did? Hi everyone. Thanks for all the supportive comments and for making me realize what an idiot I was by even doubting myself for a second about whether what I did was right or not. I guess I was just feeling quite emotional because my mother and I used to be close, but what she did made me realize that this was unforgivable, and we couldn't go back to sharing that same relationship ever again. Seeing her is what made it feel very real. Anyhow, I didn't do anything about the situation, and now my parents are getting a divorce. So, yay for me, I guess. Also, a couple of you had asked me how my mother was never able to find out that I knew the truth because I'd posted it on my social media. It kinda confused me too as well because she was active on social media, but I'm guessing that she didn't really use or bother to check my account before showing up in my house. Both my mother and Alex had deactivated the accounts before running away, so I'm not surprised that she couldn't find the post. She couldn't have accessed the post if she wasn't already on my friend list or following me, since I have a private account. A fake profile wouldn't work. So I think that's why she couldn't see what I had posted. Today, my mother finally responded to my father's divorce petition and she's decided to contest the divorce. I don't know how she thinks it's going to work out for her because literally everything is going against her. My dad told me that for almost 2 weeks, she had been trying to get him to talk to her but with no luck. Unfortunately, it's not because my dad is strong enough to let her go, but actually because he's too scared that if he speaks to her, then he might end up forgiving her and taking her back, which he cannot allow to happen. I've actually sometimes found myself wishing that I had let my mother go on for a couple of more seconds that day, so she could finally tell me what Alex was really up to. I don't want to admit it, but I do want to know what he's doing without me. I miss him. Now that all the anger and the excitement of revenge or whatever is gone, it feels really empty at home without him here, but I'm well aware it's not the same for him. Maybe I'll ask my grandmother to find out and tell me where Alex is now. From what I heard, my mother is living with her because she has nowhere else to go anymore. She can't go back to living with my father because he won't have her, and none of my other relatives are willing to speak to her because of what she did. So, she has to stay with the person who screwed her over. Hi everybody, long time no see. It's been almost 6 months since I last posted here. So my mother decided to go through with the divorce after all instead of contesting it, just a couple of weeks after my last post. She also decided to reject any alimony or settlement money just to show how great she was, so my father would take her back. Spoiler alert, he didn't. Alex and his new wife are on social media now, and my friends told me that they're both living in Europe currently. I sent him a legal notice a couple of months ago to make sure that he paid up for the wedding bills, and he did luckily, so I have nothing to worry about now. I'm still a little heartbroken about how things turn out, but as they say, every cloud has a silver lining, and I hope that someday I'll find the silver lining in my cloud. That's it for now. Thank you for being there for me, Reddit. Alright guys, that's a wrap up for today's story. Thank you very much for listening. Go ahead and smash that like button for me, and subscribe for more stories. Thanks again, and we'll be seeing you in the next one.